Anyway, hi. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming out, and welcome to people who are on the live stream joining us for the final Q&A session of our newly returned Hong Kong team. Guys, what time did you roll into town last night? 12:30 midnight. 12:30. So early this morning, which for you was 1:30 in the afternoon. Tomorrow, Hong Kong time or something.
Yeah, something.
So if anybody's quick on the math and can tell us what time they think it is, that'd be great. But you've had a very long travel day because you left at what time in the morning?
We left at 6:30 in the morning from YFC.
Hong Kong time?
Yeah, Hong Kong time.
Hong Kong is 13 hours ahead of us here in central Minnesota. So you're all a little upside down right now. But we've had a great day talking through just your experience and what it was like for you, hearing a little bit about the expectations that you had and what you did with them when they weren't met, and what God has done kind of in light of that. The reason that often our expectations are revealed when they're not met, and that sometimes leads to some potential disappointment or some potential tension in those moments. It's very often when we go, okay, this isn't what I was expecting, so what do I do with that? And that often drives us to God, and those are often the moments when we learn something about ourselves and what He would like to do through us. But we're going to give this time as an opportunity for you who are here locally and the people who are on the live stream to ask the questions that you would like to give an answer about their experience. For anybody who's on the live stream, there's like a 1-minute delay. So if you want to get your questions in early, that would be helpful. We'd be more likely to get to them. In case I'll just have you shout them from the back of you, or you can throw your hand up and I'll try and grab it. But it'll probably be a minute before you hear what I've actually said. So if you're reacting to something, know there's a bit of a delay, and we apologize for that. Are you guys able to hear okay? Good. Fantastic. Put a lot of trust in the fact that our partners know what's best here and see to their expertise. Anything else either of you want to throw in on that?
My name is Maddie. I co-led this team, and I was a vocalist as well. So some of the ways that we do that ministry is by using music, obviously, but we use a variety of secular songs, Christian songs, English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Even though none of us sing, or none of the vocalists speak Cantonese, we do that to, the YMCA has us do that, we have us do that to build bridges with that. And so we did that through music, but also through relational ministry at the Hong Kong YFC by praying with them and getting to know them on a one-on-one basis, even through the language barrier.
So as you guys continue to think about the kinds of questions you would like to ask of these team members, I'll pose the first question, and that is, would you just walk us through some of the kinds of places that you would do musical appearances, because I know there are a variety of them. You got to stand and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Deja McNabb, and I'm a vocalist. And some of the places that we performed in, we performed at YFC, the building itself, a lot. And that's where we live, and that's where YFC does most of their work, and so people would come there. We also performed in a community center several blocks away, and some people would commute there and would go to lunch. We also did several shows at the pier and on Lady Street.
And Lady Street, if you want to tell us a little bit about what Lady Street is.
Lady Street is like it's like a giant, chunk of road, dedicated to shopping and, I don't know how to explain it, little, side attractions, different types of people, busking on the street. And so some people would do musical things, sometimes they're advertising something, sometimes a famous person is singing on the side of the street and there's a big crowd, or some people will do tricks and stuff like that. And so the main buildings are restaurants and stores, clothing stores and things like that. And then on the street itself are different types of performers, and it's very, very close together, and it's a specific street.
Yeah, and most of the shops, it's not like a storefront, right? It's kind of a tent open air.
Actually, Lady
No?
Street is like their set stores. It's crazy. The tents are like off of Lady Street. Like you turn
Am
off
I
of Lady
thinking more
Street.
like Nathan Road or something when I'm talking about that? But anyway, it's regardless, it's packed full of people and stores and people performing. So the description, we're all good there. I'll stand and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Derek. I did sound tech. I was going to say that Lady Street also had the advantage of we had some repeat fans who kept coming back. The police stopped us almost every time that we were playing. So
Okay, if you're going to go there, you have to give full context
Full
on what
context.
we talked about this, Derek.
yes. So what would happen is that we would get noise complaints.
Do you know who issued the noise complaint?
Nope. They don't tell us who issues the noise complaints. It would just be the police would be like, come over and say you need to turn it down or we'll make you back up. So we turn that down, and it ended up being we'd see them coming in. It's like, how long can we leave the volume up before we just have to go into really quiet mode? So that was always entertaining. But yeah, we would get noise complaints, and the worst thing that would happen is that they would make us pack up and leave Lady Street. So that's all we were trying to avoid. But
So from previous context, teams and people who have been there before, very often the noise complaints will be coming sometimes from other performers who feel like, oh, you're getting a crowd that's bigger than mine, or you're stealing people from me. Sometimes it would come from shopkeepers who are averse to the noise, and perhaps sometimes it comes from people who don't want to necessarily hear the gospel proclaimed. But those are some of the difficulties that we have to navigate around in a street ministry setting. Yeah.
My name is Victoria, but people on this team and people in my life call me Charlie. So I have two names. I think to add to that, I want to share about how, so something that David Chu talked to us about was every time every night after we went to Lady Street and played, he would always remind us that it is a privilege that we can play there and to not take for granted the opportunity that we have. And so the cool part of that story is on the very last day that we got to play there, none of the police were there. Actually, they came and saw us and like stayed and like smiled and looked at us and was like they weren't approaching us to stop us. And I think that is that's God's provision right there. That is Him being faithful throughout this entire trip. And we learned so much about what it means to be persecuted, but also what it means to love in those situations, and what it means to trust in God in those situations, and trust our contacts as well. And so, yes, although at the time it is very kind of scary. Oh, cops are coming, but ultimately at the end of the day, we learn and we remember not to take the space that we have for granted, the opportunities we have for granted, and to ultimately trust God in delivering the message that He has for the world.
Great. So we've talked about performing at the YFC headquarters. We've talked about being on Lady Street or being at the community center. A couple of follow-up questions. I'd like to know what the ministry looked like when you were at YFC. What were you doing there?
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I'm a vocalist for CTI. And so in the YFC Communities building, we would sing for the elderly. People, 40% of the population had disabilities, mentally, and with different variety of levels. And so it was definitely, it was definitely a blessing to be able to work with them, and just to learn a lot about, because in the Asian culture, we are very, have a high value on like respecting our elders. And so, although we thought we were going to sing for youth, but it would end up being people older, and that was fine. And in the end, like, we were able to learn how to, even with the language barriers, we were able to learn how to connect with them and talk to them and get to know them. And like, they're really sweet people. And then in the Lady Street, we would reach all types of people there. And it was amazing just to like be able to draw a crowd. And this is not by our own strength. It was by God just providing people to listen to us play. And so whenever we would perform in in Lady Street or the pier, like in the streets, where it's a transit audience. We would there would be like little kids, youth, and just adults and like elderly, just anybody would just stop by and hear us sing and preach the gospel. And also in the restaurants, we would be singing and preaching the gospel to the rich. Like there was a big meeting for the business people that are really wealthy, and that some of them do not know Christ. And so we were able to encourage them and like share the gospel to people that are really rich and also people that are really poor too. So yeah, and I think just overall, all of the places we were able to to reach all types of people through the different venues that we served. Sometimes they would serve at the schools, but around the season that we came, there was no schools that were open, so we didn't get to perform in any schools, but usually they do, I guess. So that's kind of what we've been doing, and yeah, so it's been a great experience.
Cool. We give us an opportunity for some of you out there to ask questions with that backdrop of some of the things that you're doing, that they were doing, rather. Mr. Kelly.
Are there any characteristics of that really saw during your time?
So I'm always going to repeat our question so that people on the live stream can hear it. But Matt asks if there were particular characteristics of God that you kind of saw highlighted, that were highlighted for you during this time.
One thing that was neat was we had opportunities to just go out and pray with the seniors when, breaks in our sets. We would just go out and sit by them and pray for them, and most of them didn't speak English. But it was just, for me, it was some cool moments of being able to pray for them, and even though they didn't understand, God understands those prayers. So I guess that was something that kind of clicked for me was, of course, God understands all languages, but just kind of living that out and seeing that was really neat.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I play drums. And one characteristic that during training we focused on, and CTI in general focuses on, is servanthood. Like Jesus would wash the disciples' feet. And that for us, it translates to serving God in a lot of different ways, and a lot of ways we don't expect. Obviously, we came and we were expecting to hold concerts and play music, which we did a lot of. But we also did a lot of serving in different ways. Like, for example, we had to lead a group of 50 elderly people to a restaurant and then count their tickets and make sure the right amount of money is in the right place, and doing all this logistical stuff while only 2 of us speak Cantonese. So it was pretty tough, and it was definitely a learning experience. Also, we spent 6 hours one day moving fabric because this fabric shop was closing down, and they said, all right, well, someone can just take all our excess inventory. And the YFC said, all right, we'll take it, and we'll use these as gifts to give to people who are coming to the YFC to incentivize people coming in and hearing the gospel.
Now, when you guys first started telling that story, I'm thinking, okay, so they're going to a Joann's Fabric and picking up some bolts of fabric or something. Do you want to describe what this 6-hour day of moving fabric was like?
My name is Calum. I'm a guitarist on this team.
It's helpful if you stand up.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so then pretty much what happened was that when I heard that we were gonna do it, I heard it first in Chinese, like Charlie did, but then I was like, oh, this is gonna be pretty cool. It's gonna be moving some towers or something, right? Just a couple pieces of cloth, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a cool break from the music. But then we got there, and it was these industrial sized rolls of cloth, and they're this tall off the ground, and some of them are really heavy, and then there was just a lot of them. It was a lot of it, and it was on the 11th floor of a building, and we had to shuttle all of them down, and then bring them out about a city block, almost a bit more, to this bus stop that barely had room to put it in. So we shoved it up against some guy's shop, and that like it was closed. But then and then we filled it all up into 2 full-sized like cube trucks. No, not even cube truck, like the full huge moving trucks, and we filled them both to the ceiling, right? I don't know, it was a lot. And then we had to bring that back to the YFC, and we unloaded all of that and loaded it, and then like stuffed this one storage room that they had like to the brim, like to the ceiling and then to the door. And then like that whole, like, it was supposed to take, they expected us to take like 2.5 hours, but it took us about 6. And like we had to skip our night's gospel dinner because we couldn't make it because we were moving cloth. And I don't think I've sweat that much in my life before either. But it was, I think, it was really cool because I'm sure a lot of people on the team can attest to this. Like there was partway through the process of moving, like a thought would come to our mind, like, why are we moving cloth? And like, why are we doing all this? But because like, oh, like this isn't music and this isn't explicitly sharing the gospel. But one humbling thing I took away from this is that this is God's way of providing for the ministry there, and this is God's way to show that like He wants this ministry to go forward, because they use these pieces of cloth as gifts for the elderly, as more incentive for them to come, and that in turn brings a bigger crowd, and that in turn brings more people. It's more of an opportunity for people to hear the gospel. And although it's not something that all of us saw directly, I think it was something that after like a bit of like talking, we were able to figure it out. But I think it's a really humbling experience. I can say that safely, like on behalf of my team. And it was crazy, and it was pretty fun. So yeah.
We very often hear stories of non-musical serving from our Hong Kong teams. And I think it's pretty cool that you guys got to see a little bit of how, emptying a warehouse full of fabric can actually be used for the gospel. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we're pressed into service working with our partners, and we really don't know how what we're going to do or what they're asking us to do is going to help them in their mission. But in this case, you got to see a little piece of that. I will say, though, that pretty much every story we hear from a Hong Kong team about non-musical serving involves moving something heavy from the 11th floor down to the bottom, and then usually back up again, whether it's in the same building or another one. So, fabric this time. Other questions from out here? Thanks for that question, Matt. Oh, did somebody else want to answer this one? Or add?
CTI Moving Ministries.
Yes. Carpenters Textiles International. Did you want to share something? Okay. Yes. It's helpful for the camera so that people can pick you out on the live stream.
Yeah, so just a little bit about God's provision. More about that. What's an amazing thing that I saw? I think I learned before I came to CTI, I felt like my faith in God was not as strong. Realizing because my heart was to do full time, but then I had the fear of will God provide for me? How is God going to provide? And so by going to Hong Kong and then seeing we just met this lady. Her name is Mrs. Lee. Shout out to her if she's watching. I don't know, but we met her. She was hosting the big fancy dinner with the business people, and then she just we were talking to her and met her, and then she invited us to her family's church, and we just kind of just played around with the instruments. I guess she had instruments that were there, and so people were playing around with it, and it just so happened that she just wanted to really give us these instruments, these 2 guitars and 2 basses, and so she just wanted to give it to us, and so eventually after the leaders and the people from CTI discussed about it, whether we should accept it or not, because it was kind of do we greenline this? This is expensive gear, and it's do we greenline this or do we what should we do? We didn't know, and so we were all confused because it's such a generous gift and offer, and so in the end, the instruments that we were able to receive are for now going to be used for CTI ministry. And so that's a blessing just to see how God provided through people, and just how much even like our partners have gifted us things and that we do not deserve at all, but they've given to us. And you know, we had to be very discerning on how to I guess respond to those generous offers that they would offer us.
So Victoria used the phrase green lining, which now we need to define because our audience doesn't know what that means yet. You guys will. But green lining involves a lot of different things. One component of green lining is how we respond to situations where we don't know all the rules or we're confused by what's happening around us. And green lining is a choice that we have to make in advance to trust that the people that we are serving know things better than we do in the context, the cultural context especially in which we're serving. Green lining can often be a choice made when something is put before you that you need to eat and you really don't know if you want to eat it, and sometimes it's just a choice to go, okay, well, I'm gonna green line this. But in this case, it was I'm not sure what we should do in this situation, and somebody's telling us we should accept this gift, and that feels pretty extreme to us, but we're gonna trust that the people who are advising us to do that know more about the cultural context. So it involves putting a lot of trust in our partner. Other questions? Hillary has a question. Hillary asks if you are aware of a time in Hong Kong where you came to the end of yourself and how God brought you through that and what the result of that was. Basically, you no longer have the ability to do it. You've reached the end of your own means, and yet something still has to happen.
So we, I think Caleb counted, but we did about like over 57 concerts and 101 sets, like through the entirety of this. And while it was super fun, there would be days where we were just tired and exhausted, and time efficiency is very important in Hong Kong. And so it was a lot of like moving from one place to another, like very quickly and like as efficiently as possible. And so there were times where, I guess me personally, I was very exhausted and very much like we'd be at a gospel dinner and I'd be like, I'm dead tired. How am I gonna dance and sing and smile and like as best as I can, because it's not about you, it's about them. And so like you kind of have to like have a meeting with yourself and God, and you're like, okay, I can't do this. I can't give myself enough energy. It's just not gonna work. So God, I need you to do this. Like I need you to help me, and I need you to give me the strength to do that. And what's really great is like, at least for me personally, like he always did. Like if I was very tired and I was like, I can't do this, like I did it, and it worked, and it was great, and there was a lot of happiness and excitement that came with that. And then it was nice because you're like, because then after that you praise God and you're like, thank you for that. But it also shows how much you should praise and thank God, like even when you are tired and you feel like you can't go past a certain limit.
Hi everyone, my name is Nathan and I served as a vocalist on this CTI team. And one way where I had to definitely come to the end of myself was so we call this crowd duty. And what crowd duty is instead of playing your normal part, you'll go out into the crowd and you'll interact with people, because Joy has no translation, where people can't understand what we're saying because our Cantonese is bad or we're singing a song in English. You'd go to someone in the crowd and you shake their hand, and you give them a high five or pat them on the back, and they can see your joy and your excitement. But at the beginning, it was really, really awkward to do that, because I'm kind of sitting with my bike back here, and I want to go over there because those people look scary. So that was tough for me to get over myself, because I had a lot of pride. I didn't want to look weird going into the audience and jumping around. But there was one moment where I saw Deja in the crowd, standing on a chair or something. And I just wanted to do that too, and I got over myself. I asked God to give me the strength to really get to the end of myself so I could really serve God better. And through that, I was able to do that, and I went out into the crowd. I like high-fived some old grannies, and I like stood on a chair and I like danced or something, and we did like the one-way dance down the alleys or something. And it was really cool because that opened so many new pathways with, first, choreography for songs, and second, just reaching the people, sharing the gospel, not only through talking and speech, but also through nonverbal things where people can really understand us, where joy has no translation, as well as praying with someone has no translation, putting your hand on someone's shoulder has no translation. There were just so many ways that we could share the gospel that didn't involve having to speak to them, and that really impacted me, because once I was able to get to the end myself, I could really share my love for God. I could share my joy, my excitement, and the gospel with all of them, and that was amazing.
Anybody else have an end of me story?
So a couple times, we got into kind of a groove where we would play for a lot of the senior citizens like in the morning, and then another opportunity for them to hear the gospel would be to go to this dim sum restaurant down the road. And there were some points where we would actually like facilitate this experience for the seniors. So we would walk them all the way down to the restaurant, and we would serve their food and get their tickets and change things out. And there's a lot of them. And I don't speak Cantonese, and so there was the day, like I think the first or second day we did that, and mentally I was just so wondering what was going on. And I began to be really frustrated with myself about not knowing the language until, and I just felt kind of hopeless because I'm like, oh, how can we do ministry if I can't even talk to them? And it was awesome though, because I think in the middle of all that commotion and dim sum was me realizing that it wasn't about our ability to speak the language. I mean, even just showing love to them by smiling at them, seeking to understand, because God's work isn't contingent on me knowing Cantonese. And that was exciting, because I think that was probably the most frustrated I got, but it was also the most, a moment where I was able to see the sufficiency of God in his own work through us and outside of us.
So Deja mentioned gospel dinner, and I wonder if somebody can maybe give us some context on what a gospel dinner is. Do you actually know?
I do. A gospel dinner is, again, it's a YFC hosted event, and they invite people, they give tickets to people, and they give them free dinner, essentially, and at the end of the dinner, they get their money back, but they use all the time that they are, I don't want to say held captive, but they're like it's like a captive audience.
But really though.
Yeah. So while they're in the restaurant waiting for their food, they have them hear the gospel first before they eat, and then have us play and give testimonies throughout the dinner. So they use the dinner as like a way to get them to come to the event and also hear the gospel and also get connected to other YFC events as well. And we had a lot of those.
And those are usually held like at a restaurant, right?
At a restaurant,
So
yes.
you're setting up your stuff in a restaurant, and basically what YFC kind of like charters the entire restaurant, or a big chunk of it?
A big chunk of it, yeah.
But generally, because YFC is all about making sure everybody can hear the gospel, they're not too bothered if the volume in the gospel dinner seeps into the rest of the restaurant.
I will say they have like a huge ministry with like the wait staff at a lot of the restaurants as well. So they like actually spend time intentionally building relationships with people at several of their restaurants, which is awesome. It's just another ministry opportunity. But, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is no restaurant in Hong Kong that does not know David Chu personally. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Another question from our audience. Actually, Casey has one from the live stream. Hi, Bastian. Question is, most impactful one-on-one conversation you had, whether it was with an audience member or a YFC staff member or you say also another team member or whatever?
So, again, my name is Charlie. I play guitar. So we got the chance to play at the pier, Star Ferry Pier. Yeah. So we were there, and so what we would do, we would play a couple of songs, like 3, and then we would hand out tracks to the transient audience, and then we would try to have conversations with them. And so we had played our set. I went up to some lady. I handed her a track, and I kept on handing the track, and the lady just kind of stood there and looked at the paper. And I kind of backtracked, and I was talking to her, and she was just super curious about God and Christianity. She had really good questions like, why did God allow suffering in the world? Why, like, what does it mean to know God and have a personal relationship with God? And I'm one of the few people on this team that kind of can speak Chinese and Canto, and so I was able to talk to her a little bit before the translator was free to have a more in-depth conversation. But we basically had a really long conversation. I think I missed a couple of songs from the next set, and I also missed Tear Down, but it was a good conversation. So we were talking, and it was super engaging, and the gospel was shared, and I was able to pray for her, and I thought that was the end of the story. I didn't know if I was ever going to see her again. And the second to the last day, actually even the last day that we were at the pier, she was getting off from work, stopped at our where we were playing again, and stayed. I got a chance to talk to her after, and within, I guess, the 3.5 weeks we were there, not only did she accept the message of the gospel, she was also looking for a church. And something that was super encouraging was that she said, since talking to us and since actually being able to ask these harder questions, she found a joy that she could not explain. And she found a happiness that she could not explain as well. And all of that is God. I freaked out. I ran away, and I tried to not play anymore and just want to talk to her. But yeah, she's so cool. And that was definitely a God moment, because God was leading her up to that point, softening her heart up to that point, and finishing a good work.
Anybody else would like to share about a one-on-one interaction?
Yeah, so also at the pier, there was this other lady, and she was wearing I remember she was wearing a yellow shirt, and she just stopped by randomly, and she just had this smile. I remember Deja was giving her a track, and then after our set was done, I went up and talked to her, and I said hi, and she said, "Oh, I'm already a Christian," and so I was like, "Oh, cool," and then I was talking to her, but yet she was saying some things. She said she really liked my song, Sanjay, and then it was very inspiring. And then we were talking somehow about, I don't know what happened, but I was just sharing. I think I asked her what her testimony was, and then she shared, and she said how she used to, 20 years ago, she served as an English translator with YFC, and then I shared my story of how I came to know Jesus. And I don't know, afterwards she was just I'm so inspired by your just everything that you've said, and because right now she's a Christian, but she's struggling, with just she was telling me some things about just some things oh, I don't really know, I've been getting bored with Christianity and church, and I'm just feeling angry at God because he hasn't given me a boyfriend or husband yet, and she's in her 40s. And so she was just sharing a lot of other stuff that were deep and personal and sad. And so I just didn't know what else to do but pray for her. And so I prayed for her, and in the end, she was just really encouraged, and I just love encouraging other people, and just to have been able to, it was the highlight of my day, just to encourage her and pray for her, and then now we're Facebook friends, and she even messaged me hi when I got back, and so just to be able to and she's still looking for a community, kind of. I think she goes to church, but she's still kind of feeling alone, and nobody's really there to lift her up. So I feel God kind of sent her to me just to try to be in her life, and like if she ever needs somebody to talk to, I can like, continue to be there for her and like encourage her as a sister in Christ.
So kind of going along with this peer trend, I did meet, this is actually, I'll just generalize these two conversations into one. I met some interesting people at the pier, and one of them was a Muslim guy, and the other one was just some guy who's like in university, and he's just decided to leave the faith. And I had some pretty interesting conversations with them, and I think what I took away from it most was just how great of an opportunity we have to like speak about the gospel in such an open area in Hong Kong, because like there's such a huge demographic of people, and I'm not used to really interacting with too many non-Christians, because my friend based back at home is mainly Christians. So I think this is impactful in the sense that it really highlighted the need that this world has for the message of the gospel, and I think that it was a really good takeaway from it. And like this conversation, like it was like pretty chill on both sides. I think both of them were pretty respectful and chill dudes, but I think I took the most away from those two conversations. I'm not like, I remember there was one of the quotes that either you or Paul said, and it was like, we're not there to, what was it? It was like, remember the word, we're not there to convert, we're just there to, yeah. So if you can't hear her, she says, we're not there to convince people of God's existence, we're there to share the message of the gospel and let that stand on itself. And that was really good to use in those situations. And I don't know, it was just really cool, and I enjoyed it.
So I think we had mentioned this before, but a lot of the community at YFC is either elderly or disabled. And so one time so sometimes they'll like push us out of our comfort zone. And so one day they were like, we're gonna have like a little like Sunday school session. And so like they broke up the audience into like small circles, and then we like led this moment, and like they were like, you can share like a Bible story with them, or you can answer questions. And myself, Caleb, and Nathan, we had a group, and these people, like, as soon as it started, they had so many questions. I think about half of them, or like a portion of them, were Buddhist. And so it was really interesting to hear their questions. And one woman specifically, I ended up separating with her and praying for her, because she had mentioned how her life was very rough, and she was concerned because she was going blind. And she didn't really know what to do, and she was talking about how being Buddhist, because that's just what the family does, and how that's affected her life, and all like the pain and the misery she was feeling. And in moments like that, you kind of want to give someone like an answer, like you want to like tell them like, oh well, this is this, but like I just didn't have an answer for a situation that big. And so in that moment, I think the Holy Spirit was like, well, you guys need to pray. And so luckily I had a translator with me, and so he was able to tell her like what I was saying. And it was a really beautiful moment, because she started telling me like more about her life, and then she was saying how she doesn't really tell people about her life. She's very quiet and internal about the things, but she said she was very happy to speak to us and to feel that moment. And I think that was really like impactful, because sometimes I put a lot of my strength and my ability to share the gospel in like how well I sing. And that was a moment where I shared the love that Jesus has for her without singing at all. There was no music involved. There was none of it. It was just God's provision and God giving me the right words to say. And that was such a beautiful conversation, because after that she because she came to our meetings a lot, and so after that she seemed a little more like lighthearted, and that was really nice. So,
I guess I have something. So, the mic sounds louder than normal. Anyway, there was, I guess I didn't have a large conversation with him, but there was just a guy named Khalik he was a Muslim individual, and we just got to have some interesting conversations. I'm trying to remember who was with me. Was it Nathan? It was you? I wasn't sure if it was you and Dylan but it was the second time that you guys were with me. Yeah, that was my conversation with him. It was just interesting. He was very informed about the Islam parts of it, so it was just interesting in discussing differences in the religions kind of deal. We didn't convert him to Christianity at the end of it, but it was still a rewarding conversation, and then Nick was dragging me back into the building and taking away the fun of conversations. So,
Nick.
It was only 11 o'clock at that point. I don't understand why this was happening.
I just want to see this picture of Nick dragging Derek anywhere.
But does anybody else have one?
Let's go for another question from out here. Wesley. Ways that you had to adapt to the culture of Hong Kong or the culture of YFC? Because those are different things, potentially.
Just a quick one. When there's no cars at the street, you cross. It does not matter what color the light is.
I guess going off of that, once again, efficiency and time is very, very, it's a high value over there. And so I think something we had to adjust to is just moving very quickly, and not just with YFC, but if we were taking the subway, or just getting into the elevator, everything happens very quickly. The elevator shuts faster, and so or trains take off sooner, and so when you need to go, you go. Or if you're crossing the street, you kind of just wait for an empty moment, and you're you can't just cross the street at your own tempo. No, you kind of have to speed walk across the street, and I think and it wasn't really that stressful. I think it was just a difference, and because I feel I didn't have to do that, and then I got there and I was everything's moving so quickly, and we have to go, and so it actually was a great lesson though, because we learned how to manage our time really well, and so it was a great lesson to learn. But yeah.
Anybody else, how you had to adapt to the culture of Hong Kong or the culture of YFC? Okay, there are a couple of other hands out here. Other questions? Let me get one down here and then we'll come back to the live stream. Most uncomfortable thing that you experienced or unsettling event?
Sorry, I feel I'm talking a lot. So there was one evening, so we perform at Lady Street quite often, but there was one evening where it was a very rough night, because I feel there was a lot of spiritual warfare just happening, and we actually experienced persecution. We were doing a set, and I was leading a song, and so if any of you have been to Hong Kong, you know that AC drip is a thing. And so I thought what I felt, some liquid, I thought it was AC drip. And then, so I just kept singing, I just kept going, and then I look over, and a woman is spitting on me. She would take deep drags of her drink that she was drinking, and she would spit it on us. And that was not fun. It really sucked. Just on a, it hurt a lot, because we weren't there to hurt anybody. We were just sharing joy and music, but that was the reality of the moment. We were being spit on by a woman, and then she proceeded to mock us. And then some people she were with got frustrated, and the people that were on Lady Street, who they managed getting us a spot on Lady Street so we could perform. They got frustrated at her, and so it was very it was an uncomfortable and, quite frankly, at least for me personally, like a very scary moment, because we had to pack up all our things, and our partners were like, okay, it's time for us to just go home. And when we had to do that very quickly. And so, yeah, it wasn't fun, but I think it was a moment for us to kind of talk to each other and pray to God, because honestly, it could have been a lot worse. And we all handled it a lot better than we could have. It was really hard because I think a lot of us haven't experienced persecution on that level. And when you do, it's rough. But I think, like when we were talking about it and discussing it, a lot of us felt that, like, in that moment, God was telling us to love the people and that woman more. Like, I remember I was singing, I think I was singing He Is One, I think. And as it was, like, happening. And the first thing that came to my mind was, like, send them love. And that can be really hard when someone's spitting on you. But I think that just shows God's love and God's provision. And He's super faithful because we are safe. Like, we're here and, like, we are happy. And He basically showed us, at least for me specifically, that He is there. He is our protector. And He is there to get us through absolutely anything. So, yeah.
It definitely meets the test of an uncomfortable situation. Anybody else have one they want to share? Yes. Let's get another question from the live stream. I'm going to repeat the question from the live stream for the live stream. These from Roxy and or Brendan. Brendan was part of the training team who helped mobilize these guys and has been through our full-time program, and Roxy was part of our full-time program the previous year and has also, they've both been through what you guys have been through. So the questions were, how did your understanding of the gospel increase, or how did your understanding of God and His mission increase?
Okay, well, so yeah, this is a deep one. I guess the biggest thing I've learned in Hong Kong is that throughout the time I was there, I think the more I was there, I realized my brokenness more and more. And just actually pinpointing, like, what are my sins that I'm struggling with right now when things are tough. But throughout the time, because I think, like, when you share the gospel so many times, you're singing, you're sharing a gospel, you're sharing a gospel, it's like, it gets to a point where it gets so repetitive that it's easily forgotten. It's easily forgotten or, like, not appreciated. So there'll be times where I'm, like, trying to share my story, or when I get deep into one part, like, there's times where I pick a day and I'm really deep and personal about one story, and then whenever I share that story, it reminds me of, like, the past and, like, the sin and the sadness, and I forget so easily that, oh, God died and rose again so I can have a new life, and that I'm made new, and that I don't have to live this way anymore that I used to live, and, like, the old has passed and the new is to come. Right? And so for me, the biggest thing is realizing I was talking to one of the girls, Charlie, and at the time when we have our girl vulnerable nights where we talk about our feelings and stuff, and so, like, one biggest thing that I got from her that I will always remember now because sometimes I'm a perfectionist person and I like to be perfect and I like to have everything good and follow everything, but in the sense, like, when I realize my brokenness, it's not fun. It's not fun to realize your brokenness and your sinful natures. And so in the end, I realized, though, when she told me, when you realize more of your brokenness, the more you truly understand why you need Jesus and the message of the gospel. And that just clicked to me. Like, that was so encouraging for me because it reminds me that like in spite of all the things I've done wrong in my past before I knew Jesus, like because of him, I have hope in him. And I need to remember, and as I remember this gospel and like how great it actually is, and how it's such a great gift that we do not deserve at all, and it's freely given, and realizing that I'm not perfect at all, I am not enough, and sometimes I struggle with that because I want to be perfect, I want to be enough, but in a sense, we aren't enough or perfect without God. I had to realize that, and I had to let go of my pride and come to God and repent of some of the things I was struggling with during the trip, and ask him for forgiveness, and ask him, and through his strength to be better in certain areas in my life, like in my heart especially, that I was sinful in. But yeah, in the end, that's something that really stuck to me, and the understanding and you'll learn this eventually, like with the training, about understanding the gospel so that you can better effectively share the gospel. And that was so real to me when that happened in Hong Kong, to realize, oh, I'm really not a good person, and we're all not good people, but God is so loving and so graceful that he sent his only son and died for us, for all of our sins to be washed away. So that's definitely something that has my knowledge and my understanding of the gospel has, and my love for God has really definitely increased, and was that realizing why I need the gospel, and why I have no strength at all, and I need to depend more on him and to trust him more with my life.
So about having a deeper understanding of why we need to share the gospel. One thing that I realized on this trip is how often I take the gospel for granted, and how often I take my faith for granted. Like we always talk about how like the gospel is a free gift that we don't deserve, and it's so amazing, and it is for sure. But like I grew up in the church, and I have a great group of Christian friends, and I've always like at least known, in a sense, the gospel my whole life. And it's easy to forget how great it actually is and how much people need it. One conversation I had in Hong Kong that really stood out to me was, I was talking to a guy, and then I said, like, oh, have you heard of Christianity, or are you familiar with this? And he says, oh, no, like, not at all. And then I go, like, oh, like, are you familiar with, like, how Jesus died and what that means? And he goes, no, not at all. And then I kind of just told the gospel from the beginning, and this was the first time this guy had ever heard this. Caleb was also talking to him with me. And what this showed me was that I come from a place where most of the people in my life most of my friends at least know who God is, and even if they don't believe in God, they at least heard the stories. But there are people who have not heard it at all, and telling that story to someone for the first time, even if I didn't like convert them right then and there, sowing that seed is super important, and it's super encouraging to do. And I think I learned a lot about how much I don't deserve the gospel, and how much others need it.
I guess the things that I mostly learned is basically tying various experiences from personal life into the gospel type deal, since I don't really have like a super strong conversion testimony, where mine thing was basically, oh yeah, I grew up in the church, my parents had me baptized when I was a child, then I like re-accepted Christ after confirmation, that kind of stuff. So like finding how other personal experiences could tie into that to try to get better connections with people is probably the biggest thing that I saw there, rather than just talking about these men 2,000 years ago talked with very weird English words that for some reason we still translate as the weird English words. And they did stuff, convert heathens, that kind of look on the things. So it's a lot more effective to have a personal experience like from current day so that they can hear stuff, rather than just relying on the 2,000-year-old stories.
I think that something that was highlighted to me throughout our time there was the urgency of the message, because there are so many people, like Dylan was saying, that just don't know. And so we worked really hard. We were moving very quickly because there's so many people who don't know, and we've got to share the gospel with them. And even like if we don't see conversion or things like that, at least people are hearing that message, and that's really important. That at least that work is getting started that way. But just that urgency was something that was really highlighted to me.
So we said earlier, talking about expectations, that you often, and maybe we said this here, that when your expectations, you don't know that you have expectations until they aren't met. And I think sometimes overseas I found myself wondering why something wasn't happening, and seeing the gospel in light of my own entitlement was just incredible. To just stopping and thinking that when you deserve something, but really taking in that, like, we don't deserve anything, but that we deserve, even if it's just like, well, I don't deserve AC, I deserve wrath. But like, you know, like, it's, sorry. But it's true, that there's so many things that we find ourselves wanting so desperately in the midst of our own entitlement. But not only, you know, are those things gifts from God, but God was faithful to give us salvation and call us his friend and call us into to part of expanding his kingdom, and called us to work through, or works through us. And everything else, I think, just reflecting on that allowed me to see that everything we have is so much more than enough, that God has given us himself, and he has given us so much on top of that. So.
Cool, great question. Other questions from the local audience? Hannah has a question. Great pivot question for the last few minutes of our time here. In light of everything, are there ways that you're aware of that you want to live differently going forward?
Hi, I'm Elvis. I'm the bassist. I think one thing I can start trying to do more practically in my life is just being a better servant. I think just going there, just looking at all the YFC volunteers, they work so hard, and they're all smiles whenever you talk to them, and it's just kind of humbling to see them work. And just like doing all the tasks that David Chu asks us to do, there's some of them just get really random, or like it just tedious work, but just doing all those things has kind of taught me more about like what it means to be a servant, and just how like just doing whatever you can to help is like, that's how you should be a servant, not just doing what you want to do or just like what's comfortable for you to do. So I think just applying that to my daily life, and like just thinking about how I can be a servant to everyone and just be a better servant is something I can take away.
Any other answers to the what now question?
Something that I think I learned in Hong Kong that I can definitely apply is relying on God for strength, because in Hong Kong we were doing a lot and we were very tired. We had very long days and early mornings, and often doing things that we were totally not expecting to do. And it's really like physically, emotionally, spiritually draining. And taking the time to just go to God and say, like, God, I can't do this on my own, I need you. And relying on God's strength instead of your own is something that came up a lot, and I think is something that we can all use in our lives, whether that be at school, at work, with relationships with people, just anywhere.
One thing too is humility, and just like being able to have to like really kind of die and surrender to myself whenever I don't want to make a fool of myself, or I don't want to do this, or like this person's doing this wrong. So it's kind of like just knowing when to say things and when not to say things, and just like being being focused on like other people more than myself, or other, like, you know, like being more focused, yeah, on other people and than anything else. And so that's one big takeaway, is to, I want to be able to work on just as whenever I lead, just to lead humbly, and to lead with knowing that I'm a servant of God before anything else. And so, yeah.
Casey, do we have more questions on the live stream? So the question from Thomas is, what did you learn from the staff in YFC, and or how did you grow spiritually? And perhaps the first person who answers can introduce Thomas to the rest of us. Apparently a lot of people would like that opportunity.
All right, so first of all, shout out to the YFC staff. They're like awesome, like everyone there. There are a couple staff that we could like introduce. There's David, who's like the head of YFC there, and YY is kind of like the person who will succeed him, kind of. And she helps out with a lot of things that David does too, organizing, selling the tickets, a lot like that. And there's another staff named Wong, and he's like Batman, basically. He like fixes any problem. He like appears out of nowhere. He has like magic powers and stuff, so like, yeah, he's pretty cool. And basically, we had this ongoing joke where if anything went wrong, you'd go, "I won't go," and like he would like show up immediately, and it was really crazy because like
It's like his version of the bat signal in the sky.
yeah, exactly. So like something would go wrong and be like, "Won't go," and he'd be like here, and he'd like fix it really fast. It was really cool, and and there was also Thomas, who is one of our translators. Our translators, we were blessed to have so many translators that were so skilled and so like amazing at what they do that we could like basically say whatever and they'd just be able to translate it. Like shout out to all the translators. We had Thomas, Venus, Constant, Louise, David's wife, Constance, and David also translated for us. And yeah, I forgot the question now.
What did you learn? What did you learn from the YFC staff, or way that you grew spiritually?
Yeah, so there was one instance during the moving like the millions of fabrics day where there was a time where Thomas like told me, he was like, "It's more efficient to do this way," but me and Dylan, we were like, no, it's more efficient to do it this way, and I kind of like had like a battle in my head, like who is right? So I was like doing it my way, but then I realized Thomas was right. And what it taught me is that, one, put the cloth on the cart first and then put it in the elevator. And
note to self.
Yeah, and secondly, you have to trust in the authority or the people who you're serving. You have to put your utter trust in them, whoever's your authority. You have to put your trust in your parents or the people at school who know better than you, but you have to trust them completely because they know so much more than you do. Like, I was thinking back to that instance, and I thought, Thomas has been in this culture for like many years, and I've been here for like 2 weeks now, and I'm like, still, I can't get over myself. I can't just do what he wants me to do. I have to like do my own way first and then figure out it doesn't work and then go back to his way, which is actually a lot better. But I definitely learned from the YFC staff how to serve your authority a whole bunch better and really respect your authority and respected the choices that they make and trust them because they have ultimately better decisions than I have. They make better decisions than I have, and they have more context than I have to make those decisions. So that's something that I definitely learned from them.
Deja's got something.
So, like Elvis said earlier, they are super hardworking. They are up, like, earlier than us, and they go to bed later than us sometimes. And they're very diligent about their work. And so I think just learning to serve and learning to do a job without grumbling. Like, I don't know if you guys are gonna do the gagoozle thing, but it's like, is that Greek for grumble? It's something.
I don't actually remember.
Oh, okay. It's like a joke, but it means like to grumble about something. And I think learning to do a job or a service just very diligently and with love and with happiness is a really important thing that YFC has taught me. Just working and not being like, oh, I want to get this done, but working and being happy every moment as you do this task is super important. It's especially important while you're overseas, but I think it's extremely beneficial when you're back at home. And so, yeah.
Great question. Thanks, Thomas, and thanks for joining us. And want to maybe approach wrapping this up. Is there anything else we want to hit from the live stream, or? No, looks like we're probably good there as far as questions. Yeah, let's do one more for the live stream, and we'll ask if there's anything else here. Is this a safe question to ask? So close to wrapping. A time when you had to show grace to someone else, and tell us that story, perhaps with their permission. Derek appears to have one.
So Caleb, am I allowed to talk about your soundboard? Am I allowed to talk about a story with your soundboard? So anyways, no, I burned myself. It wasn't that part. This left hand's been burned many times. It's had boiling water and solders and other things touch it that were very hot. Yeah, boiling water's not fun to get on your hand. Don't do that. Anyway, the story that I have is just with his pedal board. So we finally got some solder one day, which I'd been trying to get from the very beginning of our trip there. We had a soldering iron, but no solder, which confused me. So it's like having a welding rod, but none of the sticks to actually weld with, is basically what that's like. So basically I could just poke things with a really hot item and hope that it worked, and it never did. But we finally got solder, and I was like, okay, we're going to fix this. Caleb, are you ready to help me? He was like, yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get a wet towel. Go get a wet towel, come back, Caleb's gone. And I was just like, wait, where did he go? And Don's like, he went to his room to get something. I was like, okay, sit there for 10 minutes with this 800-degree iron rod, just sitting there. I don't think Caleb's coming back at this point. I go look at him. He's on his bed listening to his iPod, just in his room, just sitting there. I was like, Caleb, what are you doing? Well, I'm really comfortable right now, Derek. I was like, are you gonna come help me solder? Do I have to move? Can you do it by yourself? This is your soundboard, Caleb. It's not even my thing. I'm volunteering to help you. Do I have to? I'm just like, Caleb, I need somebody to hold this thing for me. And then it ended up being Dylan who held it, and it was fine. You came for a moment, and then we didn't fix it, and then I had Dylan help me fix it at the end, and then it broke anyway right afterwards, and it's still broken.
So actually, this sounds like a story of a time when Caleb showed you grace by letting you talk poorly about him and apparently throw him under the bus.
He showed up. We didn't finish it. Then he went and ate pizza, and he's like, I can't help you now because there's pizza grease. So I got Dylan to help me instead.
Bradley, you have asked a difficult question.
But yeah, basically it was my frustration with Caleb about fixing his pedal board. But yeah. Anyway, Caleb, thank you for letting me say that. How did I grow from this situation? So how I grew from this situation is one, my finger grew a little bit because I had a massive blister because I touched the solder iron during this time. And personally, it was just kind of like also showing patience, and it's like, okay, I understand he's kind of tired. He also wanted to eat pizza right away, even though I was still trying to solder stuff. That's fine. But quite frankly, at this point, by the time we were finishing, I had a bag of French fries on my hand, which was still burned, and like they were frozen stuff, so it was basically cold stuff. And I was like dealing with the burn. I was like, I just want to get this soldering done now. And I was like, I can work through it, and it's kind of a figuring it out by myself. So it was kind of both a patience thing and like realizing that other people are tired at times that I might not be tired, and that Candle with Music is apparently very comforting and relaxing and doesn't like to have breaks taken from it. So that's the ways that I grew.
The thumb is probably my favorite part, though, that would grow. Any final questions from our local audience? Alrighty, it seems that you have answered absolutely every curiosity they have had. So I'd like you to give the mic to Elvis at this point in time, and this is the part that I warned you about. Can everybody who is an incoming full-timer please stand? So the people who are standing before you, or in front of you if you're in the audience, these are the people who at the end of the night will pick up the torch from you and they will become CTI. So they are today, well, they arrived on Friday, and we did some orientation and hung out over the weekend and did some more stuff yesterday, but their training in earnest will begin tomorrow. So starting tomorrow, their days will look a little bit more like what yours looked like in training, and they'll be going through some of the same seminars that you went through. There's some differences for the full-time program, but some of the same stuff, and you know something of what they're going to face, and you know something of what it is that they will be bringing to the mission field in the world. And so what we've asked them to do, why don't you guys also all stand at this point? Full-timers, if there's nothing else that you take away from this evening, we've asked them to just give their last final one-sentence encouragement of, if you hear nothing else, hear this, based on the experience that they've had. So your one-sentence encouragement to the people who will become CTI when you end your concert tonight.
Or I guess this is more of like an advice, but just remember why you came, why you're doing this, and just remember like what's the most important thing.
So I guess full-time team will be somewhat different than overseas, but at the same time, remember that even when you're having like the really late nights and like getting up at the same time in the morning, so when you're getting like a regular like 6-hour amount of sleep, just lean on like God to keep you awake and during stuff, and just don't necessarily force yourself to rely on yourself. And also don't let first impressions discolor like some things for you, because there are oftentimes you'll find out, I don't understand why this is a thing. Like the cloth is a good example for us, where it's like, we don't understand this is a thing, and then we started giving it out and it's like, oh, that's how it's going to work. So
just remember to send each other love and send the people you're ministering love. Like remember that, like when you're tired or when you're feeling like annoyed or angry, or you don't understand what's happening, or you miss home and you'd rather just see your parents and your friends, like remember to send your teammates love, like and encouragement, and remember to send love to the people you're ministering.
I just want to encourage you guys to say to remember that although we are imperfect, and we're not if you feel like you're imperfect or you're not enough at times, because of God's blood shed for you guys, you can be made perfect and enough through him.
So something cool about the full-time program is that you have so many opportunities every day to share the gospel, and you get to share what you probably wish you would have known before you became a Christian with these people. So I just encourage you deeply to not waste any time, because this message is so urgent, and before you know it, you might be up here with your Round 2 summer team. So don't waste any time, because God has given you this year specifically to share through this platform.
always be looking for ways to serve and for opportunities to advance the gospel, and be ready to work hard. But remember that God is faithful to provide you the strength that you need for every task. He's faithful to provide everything you need for your life.
Just remember that you are servants first and everything else second. And a lot of the time, that means you need to swallow your pride.
Learn to preach the gospel to yourself and learn to find joy in it. And from that joy, learn to actively find ways to reciprocate your gladness in God so that other people can experience it too.
So, I guess I'll hit y'all with a David Chu quote. Preach, pray, sing, or die at a moment's notice for the sake of the gospel.
There is no regret and no greater joy than surrendering yourself to the will of God.
Thanks, you guys. You can have a seat. You can have a seat as well. Will you join me in expressing your appreciation for this team? You can read more about their adventures on their blog at ctimusic.org if you'd like to kind of see some pictures from their time overseas. There's also a photo gallery there that might help fill in some of the gaps of what you've heard here today. We are going to break for a little while, and we're going to come back at 7 o'clock for our final concert. Team members and full-timers, we're going to have dinner here. Those of you who are joining us locally, we invite you to take in one of the many fine establishments that Wilmer has to offer. And our concert time is at 7 o'clock. We will be back on the live stream at that time as well. So thank you all very much for coming, and we will see you in about 90 minutes or so.